forward pay now, right? Because any settlement will have to, as we've long discussed here on the pod for months now, any settlement is going to have to be a future. You're going to have to a future athlete compensation model will have to be part of any settlement. And we kind of know how that model looks now. We're starting to get more information as it's further socialized with athletic directors and university presidents. We're starting to get a little grasp on that model. The first concept, as we discussed a little bit, it's been known for a while now, is there'll be some kind of revenue sharing, and there'll be some kind of cap on that revenue sharing. That it'll be an annual cap. I think we discussed the number 20 million has floated around. I think in our latest story, we kind of gave a range of 17 to 22 million because this cap will fluctuate. It will, depending on averages, it will fluctuate. And the cap is based around certain revenue streams within an athletic department, and those revenue streams will change through the 10 years. So it'll be like a rolling average, and that number will change. But it'll be in between that range of 17, 22, 23. Could even get higher the later it goes. So that's one concept of a new model. The other one is something that really had not been reported at all. It was in our story Thursday, is about the expansion of scholarships in the implementation of roster limits. This was something that was discussed 2 years ago in the NCAA Transformation Committee. They wanted to basically lift all the NCAA restrictions around scholarship limits. That's not exactly what's happening. But
you mean the number that a school can offer per team?
Per sport, right? Per sport. So, like, let's take the example of baseball is probably the best example to take. Baseball
11
gets an NCAA maximum of 11.7 scholarships to spread over 32 players. I think the total roster in baseball is more like 40 or 45.
Yeah, it's up there.
Yeah, and so you only get 11.7 scholarships. So what will happen is, again, using baseball as an example, is they'll come up with a roster limit for baseball. Say they'll bring it down a little and say 40 or 35. Well, schools will be able to have the opportunity to provide scholarships to all roster spots, though 35 or 40 if the roster limit is 40. So you have a roster limit for each sport, and schools will have the choice where they want to expand scholarships for that sport for every roster spot.
Why do they want to do that?
So, what's that?
This is where I have questions too.
Yeah. Well, no. Yeah. Why is that your question? Like, why in the world would they want to do this?
My question there is, like you've just said, we're going to buy the most expensive home possible, and we're leveraging ourselves significantly to buy that. Oh, but I also would like to buy a Gulfstream 5 private jet. So let's do that at the same time.
Like, what are we doing?
Taking on this massive added expense when you're already taking on these other massive added expenses.
Cut the scholarship limit.
Well, I think that's a good question. I think there are a variety of ways you could answer that. If you have spots, if you're sharing revenue with athletes, and you have walk-on spots, then you could share the revenue conceivably, right? You could share the revenue with those walk-ons and thus just give them a scholarship that way. So I guess this is a way around to say, to say we're gonna just have full scholarships, and then the revenue on top of that. I don't know. I mean, I think,
but like you're trying. Okay, they have to pay these players. This is coming, right? They have proposed 20% of their revenue should go to the players. Now they got no shot at stopping at 20%.
No, it's 20. Yeah, it's 22. It's 22% of the main revenue streams of ticket sales, TV rights.
Okay, so it's not even all their revenue.
It's not it's not donations, right?
Right. 22%. So it's going to be under. In pro sports, it's 50% minimum.
Yeah, right.
So I mean, It's nice of you to say, here, have 20%. That's not going to last when the Teamsters get involved. When Jeffrey Kessler's running your thing. But you have to do this. We know this is going to cost a chunk of money, even in their wildest dreams. Let's say you have a $100 million athletic department. You got 20 teams. You got to now give $20 million to the players in some form. Whatever. It's all going to football and basketball. It's going a little bit to everybody. You are now $20 million down. Why in the world would you then say, we got to make this work with only $80 million now? Let's increase the number of players that we're giving more money to additionally via the scholarship, because the scholarship is compensation. Also, it's part of the compensation process. So why in the world would you increase your spending on sports that are either doing fine at the 11 limit or whatever limit you have? A, B, you want to add scholarships. You now have to add scholarships for both men and women to try to comply with Title IX. And you're going to this makes zero sense to me.
Well, so, okay. I think there's a few answers. Number one is what I started to talk about is that you could circumvent, right, the walk-on thing, which is happening now, because walk-ons are getting NIL. They're just getting their scholarship paid. So they already have a scholarship through NIL. So I think part of the negotiations is you got to give all these spots a full scholarship anyway. You can't just share revenue with them and pay them for their tuition. Just give them the scholarship anyway. Number two, I think the power leagues, like the SEC, for instance, has for years clamored to expand scholarships in certain sports, specifically baseball, right? And give more than 11.7. So some of them want to do this, right? They want to give more scholarships. Number three, who knows, at the negotiating table, Dan, this may have been the plaintiff's lawyers saying, this is restricting athletes. You're restricting the amount of scholarships that can be distributed, and you have to do more. So I don't know which one of those three. Maybe it's a combination of all three, but that's kind of where we are. And you're right; it could be very expensive. It was kind of totaled some numbers in my story on Thursday. I talked to two Power 4 athletic directors who both plan to expand scholarships dramatically. One says he's going to spend $9 million extra on scholarships a year, and one said he's going to spend $10 million additional on scholarships a year, because, like Dan, you mentioned, when you add men's scholarships, you have to add women. So if you're going to add 10, 15, 20 scholarships for baseball, you need to have to go over to a women's sports and add similar or the same amount. So it can be very cool. When all totaled up, it's going to be at least, it depends on the school, because schools, again, this is permissive as well. Just like the revenue sharing cap, you don't have to get to the cap necessarily, right? You could choose to go halfway there, a third of the way there, whatever. Just like this is just
Sacramento
like that,
Kings.
right?
Sacramento Kings have made a lot of money through the years. So a cap, what is that? We don't.
Yeah,
we don't know.
And same thing with the scholarship. There's kind of a cap. The cap of the scholarships is a roster limit, but you don't have to get all the way there.
This still seems like a horrible idea. But go ahead, Pat.